Ray Fiennes is in charge of helping to pick the new pope in the new movie Conclave, because if there's anything people want right now, it's more stuff about elections. Hello everybody, I'm Dan Murrell here with my review of Conclave, which is getting a wide theatrical release this weekend after Focus Features saw what early response was from the festival circuit and said, hey, you know what, we might have something here. Conclave is from director Edward Berger, whose last film, All Quiet on the Western Front, was nominated for 9 Oscars and won 4 of them. And it's from writer Peter Strawn, who was Oscar nominated for his adaptation of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. Conclave comes from the book by novelist Robert Harris. Ray Fiennes stars as Cardinal Lawrence, a high-ranking Vatican official whose task is to lead the conclave, the process of picking a new pope after the current pope dies. Now, in the real world, this is one of the most secretive processes ever. Nobody really knows exactly what goes on behind closed doors. So, of course, for an author and later for the screenwriter of this movie, it gives them the chance to use the 2 words that writers salivate over more than any other 2 words: dramatic license. And this conclave is dramatic as a handful of cardinals jockey for position to become the next leader of the Catholic Church. Among them are Cardinal Bellini, played by Stanley Tucci, a reformer who wants to see the church modernized; Cardinal Tedesco, played by Sergio Castellitto, a hardliner who wants to see the church move back to tradition; Cardinal Adeyemi, played by Lucien Smati, who's aspiring to be the first African pope in centuries; and Cardinal Tremblay, played by John Lithgow, who seeks the papacy by virtue of being the least contentious candidate.
This might be seen as a tactic to blacken the name of a rival.
Well, that's a despicable accusation.
Is it? I wonder.
Now, all of these candidates have different factions within the different cardinals, and Ray Fiennes does a really good job playing the person who's just at the center of the storm. Cardinal Lawrence is facing his own issues of faith as he tries to balance his role in making sure that the new pope is worthy of the office, and also the role that faith plays in this process and not interfering with what's supposed to be the will of God. There's a fair amount of detective work involved here, and that's all complicated by the fact that all of the cardinals, including Lawrence, are supposed to be completely sequestered from the outside world, which is why he often seeks the help of other people, allies, like Isabella Rossellini's sister Agnes. Now, when it comes to thrillers, I think there are 2 main types of thrillers. You have like the action thrillers, the suspense, etc. And then you have the people talking in a room thrillers, the ones that are about discussions between various different people in a game of cat and mouse. That sort of thing bores lots of people to tears, but it's the kind of movie, quite frankly, that you can sign me up for 9 times out of 10. I love people talking thrillers. And while Conclave is definitely aimed towards the adult market, it also isn't full of sex and violence and over-the-top language. I mean, that stuff has its place in certain movies, but it would have seemed out of place in this one, given the setting. Even though a lot of these people aren't the best people in the world, you still have to keep up appearances. And I think that it's a great reminder that you can make a film for adults without feeling like you have to pack it with sex and violence and language and all of the stuff that many people use to generate edge or to scream, hey, this is a movie made for grown-ups. Conclave is rated PG. This would be the first Best Picture nominee, if it follows this Oscar buzz and gets nominated for Best Picture, to be rated PG since Little Women, which came out back in 2019. And I do have to kind of applaud the filmmakers here for saying, hey, listen, we're going to make a kind of a heavy film and a film that deals with adult subject matter, but we don't necessarily feel like we have to write into the script that it is a movie for adults. We're going to let it speak for itself. Ray Fiennes is getting a lot of Oscar buzz for his performance in this movie, and rightfully so. It's the sort of quiet, troubled intensity that delivered an Oscar to Cillian Murphy last year for Oppenheimer. Cardinal Lawrence is a troubled man whose ambitions have been squashed by his role in the Vatican, and it's his lack of remarkability that makes him perfect to lead this process. It feels like anyone else but Cardinal Lawrence would be blinded by his own ambition, and maybe that's why he was selected to do this, to lead this conclave. And you need a steady hand because the waves of revelations that come in over the days that this conclave lasts would have been a little bit too much if you add in a main character who's also trying to angle and position. The script and the story smartly know that you let everything else happen around Father Lawrence and let Ray Fiennes anchor the movie, and he does a great job of that. The entire cast is great, but I'd also single out Stanley Tucci as a possible awards contender. His Cardinal Bellini is a reformer, so he sees this as a high-stakes election more than a divine ordination, and honestly, that's probably closer to the truth. And his desperation to see the church move in the direction he believes is righteous drives him with increasing fervor. Stanley Tucci's only been nominated one time for an Academy Award for The Lovely Bones back in 2010. I think he should have been nominated at least one or two other times, and I would love to see him pick up his second nomination for this movie. This is also a beautiful film with cinematography from Stéphane Fontaine, who shot films like Jackie and Mr. Fantastic, a score from Volker Bertelmann, who won an Academy Award for All Quiet on the Western Front, and spectacular production design from Susie Davies, who also designed Saltburn last year. Recreating a location like the Sistine Chapel is no small task, and all the movie's settings are beautiful and feel authentic, even the ordinary ones, which stand out in their simplicity in stark contrast to the pageantry of the Cardinals that they're hosting. Now, some people might interpret Conclave as an attack on the Catholic Church, but I didn't really see it that way. Of course, I'm not a Catholic, so I don't necessarily have a vested interest. But I think what the movie's really trying to say is that men, meaning mortal human beings, are flawed. And what this whole process is about, what Cardinal Lawrence is trying to do, is to make sure that the institution of the Catholic Church isn't going to be ruled by the flaws of the individual people that are seeking the ascendance to the papacy. Cardinal Lawrence actually gives a good speech at one point where he says that he believes that the next pope shouldn't be somebody who's perfect. He believes that the pope should be an average mortal person who sins, but then who strives to move past those sins. And unsurprisingly, the room of cardinals that he's talking to, men who really want to believe that they are above sin, don't really respond to that speech in a very positive way. But I think it's really well written, and it also sets up that dichotomy early on in the movie. The papal drama is riveting, and I was on the edge of my seat trying to predict who would eventually be elected as the next pope. But Conclave has another twist in its back pocket that really caught me by surprise. If you'd given me 50 or honestly 500 guesses as to what it would have been, I never would have figured it out. And I think that it is something that's going to be very divisive. I think it's something that might be misunderstood or misinterpreted by some people. It's definitely going to get twisted and turned to be used in the ongoing culture war stuff that we see right now. But I also think that it's something that a lot of people just aren't really going to quite know what to do with. I saw the movie in an early afternoon screening that was surprisingly almost sold out, largely by older adults, an older audience. And when we got to that part of the movie, I heard a few sneers and a few people that weren't quite happy at the direction the movie had just taken. I don't have a problem with what the plot development is on its face. I'm just not quite sure if it was necessary for the story. It's kind of like you're telling a story to one of your friends about a car crash that you almost got into, and it's a very long and involved and interesting story, and then they go, anyway, yeah, so luckily I didn't get into that crash. Oh yeah, and then afterwards I was abducted by aliens. It's definitely an intriguing development, and it makes you go, wait, what? You know, it elicits that surprise reaction from you, but it also kind of diminishes the story that came before. And I think that's what I'm going to really have to sit with for a while is, was this a development in the story that had an impact on the story that came before it? Because when I was watching it, I thought the movie had actually really perfectly resolved itself and said what it was trying to say in a really, really compelling and interesting and well thought out way. And then they just kind of add in this something extra that made me go, well, okay, that's interesting, but it seems to take away with what they've already done. I think this is going to be one of those things I just have to think about for a while, maybe watch the movie again, knowing this piece of information, and then see how I feel about it. And so if I was going to point something out, I'm not really quite sure it's a flaw. It's just something kind of odd about the movie. It would be that very last thing, which is the last thing that you see in the film. So it's what you walk out of the theater thinking about. But at the same time, I cannot really argue or disagree with the fact that the 98% of the film prior to that is exceptionally well shot, exceptionally well acted, exceptionally well written. It's a very, very well done movie with kind of an interesting creative decision made at the end. So when I'm looking at it on my personal rating scale, this gets very close to see it now territory, but the kind of puzzling decision made toward the end of the film bumps it just down to it's good, although I will concede that this will be on my list as far as some of the best performances and the technical categories, etc. at the end of the year. And this may also make its way onto my best movies of the year list. I just have to think about it a little bit more. But what do you think? Are you heading out to see Conclave this weekend? Are you excited to see this movie that's got some serious awards buzz? Let Let me know down in the comments below, and as always, thank you so much for watching me here on the channel. Be sure to stay tuned right here for more movie news, reviews, box office, and more. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.